At first glance, it looked like the ultimate modern royal fairy tale. You had the glowing duchess, the hand protectively resting on the bump, the shy smiles into the flashing cameras. It was the picture-perfect image of a new era for the monarchy. The public was ready to celebrate, the media was ready to fawn, and the narrative was set in stone. But almost immediately, something in the picture started to flicker. It wasn't a sudden explosion of scandal, but a slow, creeping realization that what we were seeing with our eyes didn't match what we were being told. Royal watchers, usually content with discussing fashion choices, and gala dinners started noticing things that simply didn't add up. It started with a whisper, a photo here, a video clip there, but it quickly snowballed into one of the most controversial and hushed-up theories in royal history. We aren't just talking about bad angles or unflattering outfits. We are talking about physical impossibilities, timeline contradictions that baffled the press, and a level of secrecy that went far beyond privacy and straight into the realm of deception. While the world was told to look left at the happy couple, the real story was unraveling on the right. And the receipts? They are more uncomfortable than anyone in the palace wants to admit. The first cracks in the story didn't come from leaked documents or insider gossip. They came from the Duchess herself, or rather from the physics of her pregnancy. Public appearances are the lifeblood of royal duty, and naturally, all eyes were on Meghan. But as people zoomed in, the consistency of the pregnancy bump became a massive point of contention. In 1 week, photos would show a high, firm, prominent bump that looked ready for the third trimester. Yet just days later, in a different outfit, the stomach appeared drastically flatter lower or completely different in shape. Fans initially tried to wave this off. We've all seen how clothing can change a silhouette, and posture plays a role. It seemed reasonable to give her the benefit of the doubt. But then came the movement. In a now infamous clip, Meghan was seen squatting down to pet a dog with her knees together, moving with the agility of a gymnast, popping back up with zero effort. Any woman who has carried a child near full term knows that the center of gravity shifts. The hips widen, and frankly, popping a squat like that is physically defying nature. It wasn't just the squat, it was the pop. There were moments caught on camera where the bump seemed to fold or compress in ways that solid human flesh simply does not. In one appearance, the bump seemed to sway separately from her body. In another, it appeared to be distinctly square-shaped. The internet didn't just shrug this off. They started screenshotting. Side-by-side comparisons flooded forums not out of malice initially, but out of sheer confusion. How does a woman look 9 months pregnant on Tuesday and 5 months pregnant on Thursday? The visual narrative was glitching, and instead of addressing it, the couple clamped down harder on privacy. But as we know, when you try to hide a fire, you usually just create more smoke. While the internet sleuths were analyzing photos, a different kind of manipulation was happening regarding the birth plan itself. Meghan and Harry had spent months carefully curating a very specific image for this birth. It was going to be the antithesis of the stiff royal tradition. No standing on the Lindo wing steps like Princess Catherine or Diana. No, this was to be a natural home birth at Frogmore Cottage. The press was fed stories about doulas chanting and a serene, holistic environment away from the prying eyes of the media. It fit Meghan's brand perfectly, the independent modern woman breaking free from the institution's cold medical practices. The public ate it up. It sounded empowering. It sounded like a woman taking control of her body. But then the script flipped overnight. On the day of the birth, the serene Frogmore narrative evaporated. Meghan was whisked away to the Portland Hospital in London, a high-security, ultra-luxury facility. Now let's be clear, plans change. Medical necessities happen. If a home birth becomes unsafe, you go to the hospital. That is responsible parenting. But the issue wasn't the change in location. It was the deception surrounding it. There was no announcement that the plan had changed. There was no due to medical advice we have relocated. Just silence. For a couple that preached authenticity and living their truth, the complete erasure of the home birth narrative felt jarring. They had let the public believe one story while living out a completely different one in secret. It was a bait and switch. The Portland hospital visit was shrouded in such extreme secrecy that senior royals allegedly didn't even know it was happening until it was over. Why the cloak and dagger? If the pregnancy was straightforward and the birth was standard, why treat the location like a state secret? This wasn't just privacy. This was operation control. And when you control the narrative that tightly, people start asking what exactly you are trying to hide. If the location change was a PR stumble, the timeline of the birth announcement was a PR catastrophe. This is where the incompetence or perhaps the deliberate obfuscation reached its peak. Standard royal protocol is clear: you announce when the Duchess goes into labor and you announce when the baby is born. It's a simple timeline meant to keep the press informed without intruding on the moment. But with Archie's birth, the timeline collapsed on itself. Buckingham Palace released an official statement announcing that Meghan had gone into labor. The press pack's scrambled news anchors rushed to their desks and the world held its breath. But here is the kicker: Archie had already been born hours earlier. In fact, by the time the "she is in labor" announcement went out, Meghan, Harry, and the baby were reportedly already back at home. The media had been played. They were told to look for a birth that had already happened. This wasn't just a mix-up. This was a direct contradiction of reality. Why release a statement saying labor has started when the baby is already swaddled in a crib? This specific discrepancy is what poured gasoline on the surrogacy rumors. In the eyes of the skeptics, the timeline didn't make sense because the physical reality didn't match the paperwork. It felt like a pre-planned media rollout that got out of sync with the actual events. It suggested that the palace was either completely out of the loop or was being forced to distribute false information to buy time. And that little window of time, those missing hours between the birth and the announcement, became the breeding ground for the wildest theories. Because if you can't trust the time on the birth announcement, what can you trust? Fast forward to the aftermath and the narrative shifted again. This time, it wasn't about the birth. It was about the survival. Meghan sat down with Oprah and painted a picture of absolute devastation. She described her pregnancy as a time of profound loneliness, claiming she was isolated, unprotected, and pushed to the brink of wanting to end it all. She told the world that the Palace Human Resources Department turned her away, that she was a prisoner in a gilded cage, sobbing while the gray suits ignored her pleas for help. It was a heartbreaking story that turned the world against the monarchy. But then the other side of the story started to leak, and it didn't look anything like the picture Meghan painted. Internal documents, emails, and staff testimonies began to surface, the receipts that Piers Morgan and others alluded to. These weren't stories of a woman abandoned. They were records of a staff pushed to the breaking point trying to accommodate her. The alleged schedules showed a flurry of activity. Far from being ignored, the document suggested that palace aides were bending over backwards, canceling prior commitments, and working double shifts to handle Meghan's demands. There were logs of appointments, wardrobe changes, and frantic rescheduling to fit her desires. The Duchess' difficult nickname didn't appear out of thin air. It was born from the exhaustion of a staff that claimed they were being bullied, not the other way around. If these documents are accurate, they reveal a massive contradiction. You cannot be both the neglected prisoner who no one listens to and the demanding boss who has everyone jumping at your command. The existence of these internal records suggests that the isolation narrative was less about reality and more about crafting a victimhood persona to justify their exit. This brings us to the most aggressive critic of the narrative, Piers Morgan. While the American media was largely sympathetic, Morgan went on the offensive. He didn't just question the story, he accused Meghan of weaponizing motherhood itself. His argument was that Meghan and Harry realized early on that pregnancy and a new baby were the ultimate shield. By wrapping themselves in the protective cloak of expectant parents, they made any criticism of their behavior look like an attack on a vulnerable woman. Morgan pointed out the strategic use of the mother bear trope. Whenever questions about their spending, their staff treatment, or their hypocrisy arose, the response was always pivoted back to their emotional safety and the baby. It was a deflection tactic. Morgan famously claimed that there were different versions of the birth announcement scripted and ready to go before the baby was even born, a claim that suggests a level of calculation that is chilling. According to this theory, the chaos of the birth, the secrecy, and the conflicting timelines weren't accidents. They were designed to create confusion, which allowed the couple to control the flow of information completely. If the press is confused, they can't report accurately. If they can't report accurately, the couple can accuse them of spreading misinformation. It's a circular trap. Morgan argued that by crying wolf on privacy, they were actually inviting scrutiny only to then cry victim when the scrutiny arrived. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy designed to market them as martyrs of the media rather than royals who simply didn't want to follow the rules. The culmination of this narrative management was the Oprah interview. To the casual viewer, it was a raw, unfiltered confession. But to body language experts and critics who had been watching the timeline, it felt like the performance of a lifetime. When you rewatch that interview with the knowledge of the conflicting timelines and the leaked documents, the cracks in the performance start to show. Critics pointed to the left eye tear, a classic acting technique, and the perfectly timed pauses. The cadence of her voice, the dramatic looking down before answering, the way she framed the concerns about skin color without naming names, it all felt scripted. It didn't feel like a conversation. It felt like a deposition. Meghan, an actress by trade, knows how to hit her marks. She knows how to convey vulnerability. But there is a difference between feeling an emotion and projecting one for a camera. The most damning part of the interview wasn't what was said, but what was omitted. She implied that Archie was denied a title because of his race, a claim that was constitutionally incorrect based on laws from 1917. She implied she had her passport taken away despite flying all over the world for baby showers and vacations. The vulnerability was used to mask the inaccuracies. It was an emotional sleight of hand look at my pain so you don't look at my facts. And for a long time, it worked. The world was so blinded by the emotional weight of her story that they forgot to check the logic. But once the emotion faded, the logic, or lack thereof, was all that remained. But perhaps the loudest evidence of all is the silence. Harry and Meghan are a litigious couple. They have sued newspapers over letters, they have sued over security, they have sued over phone hacking. They have a legal team on speed dial ready to crush any story that defames them. Yet regarding the moon bump theories, the surrogacy rumors, and the fake pregnancy allegations that have circulated for years, absolute silence. Why? If these rumors are as damaging and false as they seem, why not shut them down with a single legal letter? Why not release the medical records and end the speculation instantly? In the court of public opinion, silence is often interpreted as avoidance. When you aggressively fight the small battles but ignore the massive elephant in the room, it tells the public that you don't want to look under that particular rock. Harry, the man who swore to protect his wife from the media beasts, stood by while people theorized that his child wasn't carried by his wife. His lack of defense on this specific topic is baffling unless you consider that they simply didn't want to engage with the evidence that might be brought forward in a court of law. Legal discovery is a dangerous thing if you have secrets to hide. By staying silent, they allowed the rumors to fester, but they also avoided having to prove the rumors wrong under oath. It was a calculated risk. Let the internet talk because taking it to court might reveal more than they were willing to show. In the end, this isn't really about whether a bump was real or fake, or whether a baby was born at home or in a hospital. It is about the erosion of trust. When you build a brand on authenticity and truth, your currency is credibility. Every time a photo was edited, every time a timeline was fudged, and every time a narrative was rewritten without explanation, a little bit of that currency was spent. The public didn't turn on them because they were racist or hateful. Many turned on them because they felt gaslit. They were told not to believe their own eyes. They were told that asking logical questions was an act of aggression. The moon bump saga is just the symptom of a much larger disease, the belief that you can curate your own reality and force the world to accept it. But the internet has a long memory, and the receipts don't vanish just because you ignore them. Now, as they attempt to rebrand and relaunch their careers away from the royal family, that shadow of doubt follows them. It's the boy who cried wolf, or in this case, the duchess who cried privacy while courting the world's attention. Once credibility is cracked, it is almost impossible to glue back together. And that more than any title or palace is what they have truly lost.